I'm JG Michael, and this is Parallax Views.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. Independent media matters, and your support makes it possible. If Parallax Views has challenged your thinking, exposed you to new ideas, or simply kept you company on your commute, now's the time to help sustain it. Listen, share, and if you can, support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. If you want, you can also make a one-time donation by contacting me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. I can give you a link to my PayPal page if you contact me that way. Let's show what listener-supported media can do. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we're going to be joined by first-time guest Klaus Marre of the independent news website Who, What, Why to discuss the infighting within MAGA over Jeffrey Epstein. Trump says, forget about it. Get over this Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Why are you still talking about it? I'm tired of these supporters of mine talking about it. I don't want them to support me anymore. Now, some MAGA influencers are supporting him or placing the blame on figures like Pam Bondi. But a number of MAGA supporters seem very angry about the Trump administration wanting to drop the Epstein case, push it to the side. We're going to talk about the implications of that. We'll also talk about the right-wing noise machine or the right-wing propaganda machine, a subject that Klaus has written a lot about. And we'll even talk about the failings of the Democratic Party, especially near the end of the episode. So, with all that being said, let's get right to it with Who, What, Why's Klaus Marre. Welcome to Parallax Views, a first-time guest on the show, but one I've been wanting to have on. He is a senior editor for politics at Who, What, Why, and he's also the director of the Mentor Apprentice program at Who, What, Why. We've, of course, had others at Who, What, Why on this show, like Russ Baker and William Dow, and now we're joined by Klaus Marre. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I was really taken in by your recent coverage of the sort of MAGA meltdown over Jeffrey Epstein. For people that have been living under a rock, where do you see this as starting in the past few weeks?
Well, I think it really started with the Elon Musk and Donald Trump feud, uh, right? Because the two, as you'll remember, like a month back or so, over the mega bill and the opposition of Elon Musk, so they had their falling out, and Musk tweeted, "Hey, remember why we're not seeing the Epstein files? It's because Trump is in them. Have a nice day." Essentially, I don't remember what his tweet says. He's deleted it by now. I think I have a screenshot in my most recent piece from today. And then, of course, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, they had some issues by doing interviews and saying, well, you know what, this Epstein thing, it's not going to be as awesome as you think it will be. You know, they had a joint interview. And of course, Pam Bondi in February was like, yeah, we're doing this. It's awesome. Epstein files coming right out. They're on my desk. It's going to be, ooh, wow, you know. And so that's how it all started. So the base is really excited about this thing, which is really at the core belief of the most loyal Trump supporters. This is like a core thing. And and so if you promise them some stuff, and the thing that they believe is the central scandal of our time, like the thing that typifies why a Donald Trump was needed, is because you live in a world where good, hardworking Americans can have their 14-year-old daughters groomed to be sex slaves for the rich and wealthy of the world, and nothing ever happens to them. And this is the thing that is central to, like, this typifies the entire thinking. And then
Yeah,
to be
real
like,
quick, not to interrupt you, but
yes, yes,
it's
yes,
interesting that you say that because before I interviewed you, I was just interviewing Chris Lehman at The Nation magazine, and he said the
yes.
exact same thing. He said, MAGA has sort of a almost a religious belief system when it comes to this kind of deep state pedophile cabal ring. Yeah,
And this very thing, if it were something else, if it were, 9/11, what happened in Building 7 or something, or even if it were like the moon landing is faked or something, like, that wouldn't be, that really, like, in a way, you could be like, yeah, whatever, but to be like the all powerful are so powerful that even because so much of what the ideology is, so much is like,
well, yeah, Pizzagate, QAnon.
well, yeah, or just even like your normal Fox News coverage. It's like, look, another brown person did something bad to a blonde woman, without ever, like, you're taking this on immigration, when every statistic says if you are an undocumented immigrant, you are much less likely to commit a crime than a normal immigrant. And if you're a normal immigrant, you're much less likely to commit a crime than a natural born American. But if all you're getting is this anecdotal evidence of, here's a guy who came across the border and he was driving and hit a blonde girl, and it's always children and blonde women, and so this really is at the core. And if we can't protect our daughters, our precious children, from these predators, then what can we do? We need Donald Trump to come in and clean house. And now you're like, hey, listen, Epstein, what a thing. It doesn't matter. You guys are idiots. It's crazy. There isn't even, you can't even compare it to anything else. It's just like if, like back in the day, Gorbachev would have been like, socialism, man, you guys are suckers. We're done. It's like you can't pull the rug up from under people in something that they believe. So, well, it's like you said, it's like a cult, it's like a religion. So if you're just like, just imagine if the Pope came out tomorrow and be like, you know what, Jesus, he was a cool guy. He was all, like, we're not saying that, but Son of God, guys, come on, are we kidding? You guys are idiots to believe that. Just imagine, that is what's going on right now. The question, of course, the only question is whether or not it's going to work.
Well, it's interesting because in a weird way, I'm surprised that MAGA or elements of MAGA were blindsided by this, especially the grassroots base, because I remember Trump was saying on Fox News in an unedited interview that, we got the edited version of it from Fox, but, he was saying, well, I don't know about the Epstein files and if we're going to release all those. Lots of innocent people getting accused of things. The 9/11 and JFK files, but go on.
Yes, lots of phony stuff in there. It's like, yeah, if your name is in there, I bet you think it's phony, But it's not even that. If you go back and in a couple of my stories, I quoted it in 2002, I believe, New York Magazine wrote a profile of Epstein, and Trump was in there. We're like, yeah, terrific guy, Epstein, man, that guy likes to party. You know what? He likes women as much as I do, just on the younger side, and like, in retrospect, if you read that and be like, so you knew, like, how, what's going on. But of course, and I think this is really, really central to understanding how this works, because I write a lot about this right-wing propaganda machine that works so well, and there's nothing on the left that can duplicate it, because well, for a gazillion reasons that we can go into maybe another time. That like that quote, even if it shows up somewhere, or the unedited version of the Fox interview, where if you watch the Fox interview, which of course is exactly the same thing, why Paramount just settled for $50 million, is the edited 60 Minutes interview, and this is exactly that. The edited version, it's like, are you going to release this? Yes. Are you going to release this? Yes. Are you going to release this? Yes. And then you just move cut into the next question, when really it was like, are you going to remove this? Yeah. Well, but maybe not, because, and no, it's not really relevant. So, but if you had aired that to Trump supporters, even among them, the alarm bells would go off. So this is just, it's tough to understand for people who are not in that bubble, how little information that you think people should have pierces that bubble. Like, for example, Trump was like, well, we just got to move on, and the very next day, Fox, which had some coverage, Matt Gertz from Media Matters, he counts this stuff. And so on yesterday, by 4 p.m., that's when that's when it gets into I think the 5 comes on, and there's a Democrat on there, Jessica. So, but by 4 p.m., they had mentioned Epstein 0 times. It's just like it stopped being a story because they don't want it to be a story. And they had talked about Biden 85 times, most of it about the auto pen. So it's easy to point at these people who are just, going to work. They're not on Twitter 24/7, on Blue Sky. They're not consuming news all the time. They're just going to work, and then they're coming home, and then they're going on to their chat group and their Facebook groups, and that's where they get the news. It's easy to say, how could you not know? In a way, it's like, how could you know? Because you never get that information, and that's how Pizzagate starts.
In terms of what this means for MAGA, I know a lot of people will say, well, Trump is just the cat with 9 lives, or maybe a better comparison, he's like Freddy Krueger. He just keeps coming back and back and back,
Yeah.
right? But I feel like this is the one thing that could actually maybe potentially break MAGA apart. Do you think that that's potentially the case here, that it is going to be sort of a breaking point for MAGA?
I It's so tough to say, right? Because if you could be like, well, hey, a guy being on tape saying that they routinely sexually assault women and bragging about it, is that a bad thing? It's like, not if that name is Donald Trump. It's like, what about starting a coup, a deadly coup? Is that a bad thing? It's like, no, let's just reelect them. What about uh, like using the White House as like a personal piggy bank, or like both taxpayers and donors? So it's so tough to say. It's so tough to say that this will make a difference. There would need to be a champion, because otherwise, if it's just like somebody who's a podcaster who has like an audience of 100 or 200,000, but if somebody like before, if you would have told me in a feud between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, who is always going to come out ahead, it's always going to be Trump, because he just has the levers of power. Like all that, those $1 billion are not going to do you any good. If there can be, rightfully, you can be like, well, Elon's brother admitted they were here legally, so let's do this, or the companies, or let's do investigations, let's send OSHA, send the SEC, like all of these things. Like, if you are running a corrupt government and you are an authoritarian leader, nobody is safe. So before, if you would have told me, it's always going to be Trump. But if Elon Musk, with his like 280 million followers, many of whom, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, of course. If he is like, I'm going to take this guy down, but I don't think he has any interest in that, so But there needs to be somebody. I wrote an article that the Democrats have to be smart about it because right now they're still just they're kind of smug about it. You know, they're just like, "Ooh, Epstein, let's just do it. Hey, here's another resolution." You know, they have to really believe because here's the thing: there is something there, obviously. You know, there are so many things that happened that, and just obviously we know about Epstein himself. Uh, Maxwell is in prison, and people have been convicted, and before he got a slap on the wrist. There is something there. There's like all the women who came forward, Prince Andrew, the victims. It's clearly there. It was so easy though to dismiss it because the people who latched onto this are also the ones who are then like Pizzagate. It was like, it was about drinking blood and and then you're like, well, you guys are idiots. But if there is a Democrat who really is like, we really have to get to the bottom of this. And if Bill Clinton's name comes up and he comes down and his legacy is destroyed, then so be it. You shouldn't be doing this stuff in the first place. And we know things about Clinton that we know. Would it be the most surprising thing? So you have to be willing to sacrifice. It's like a game of chess. Like to make the other side, you're going to have to make a sacrifice. And if there's a Democrat who's like, this is going to hurt some of our people too, but we're going for it, but we're taking it seriously. And we're not just doing it as like a performative tool to be like, we're going to make you vote on this again. There needs to be somebody who really sinks their teeth in it. And it's like, I'm looking into this, I'm doing this, and this is what I'm doing every day. And I'm going to update you. I'm going to update you daily on what I'm finding. And it's full disclosure, it's total transparency. Let's go. If you have that, if you have like these different ingredients, so I think you're right that there's the potential for this major thing. But these people have been duped by Trump so many times. I mean, just 2 days ago, it was the anniversary of the shooting. And everybody was like, well, that guy is the second coming. He was clearly spared by God for doing like they also believe that. So to say over this, like this is it, it's too early. But of course, like you can't act more guilty than Trump is right now. Yeah, like because he's not a subtle guy. He's just like if we would have started this interview and be like, hey, I'd love to be on the show, but you're asking about the thing in 1997 when I was in college. I'm ending it right now. And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but now I want to know what happened in 1997 when you were in college. And that he's he's just so stupid, to just be like, you're all idiots. We need to move on. There's nothing to see here. When normally he just understands, he's always been able to tap into like
he's
that.
misread the room.
Well, yes and no, because if he knows what he did and that it's going to come out, then he didn't misread the room because that's the smaller, then making them upset because he tells them that they're idiots and it's time to move on is the smaller prize than one day to be like, well, here's a video of Donald Trump with a 50-year-old. So everybody says he's misreading the room, but if you have like two really crappy options, you pick one of them and go with it.
Not to go too much outside of the Epstein discussion, but you talked about the sort of your reporting and research into the sort of right-wing propaganda machine. There's a book that I was always fascinated by that Sidney Blumenthal, a close friend of the Clintons, wrote called, I believe it was called The Counter-Establishment, or that's what he sort of called the right-wing noise machine, or what Clinton called the vast right-wing conspiracy.
Yes.
But I always tell people it's very real. Like, the right-wing apparatus in this country created a sort of counter-establishment, their own media ecosystem where they could create an alternate reality and an alternate
Yes.
history of America. How did they build this?
Well, I mean, obviously it started with talk radio, which is like something AM radio, which is something that nobody ever paid any attention to. Like that was all like under the radar. And then Fox News just came at a perfect time, like right during the Clinton scandal. You had the Lewinsky scandal and be like, well, we told you this is what the people are like, you know, and there it's just a because it's not a news outlet. It's like an entertainment thing for gullible racists, So and you learn that it's okay to feel this way, which is another thing for Trump. Like Trump is like, hey, you're a horrible person. You hate like A, B, C, D, E, and F, and that's fine. Those people are terrible. You should be allowed to hate them. And they're like, oh, great, I like you, dude. And so, but it's all about Fox News, because like once you have somebody who so successfully did the fair and balanced thing, and then people felt they would have to, but it's so not an honest broker. They've never acted in good faith. But you treat them, and it is true. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I was a reporter in DC for 10 years. You can say like, yeah, obviously most people who go into this job are are more liberal than they are conservative. There are plenty of conservatives, but they are more liberal than not. But that also doesn't matter if you don't like if you can be liberal, but if you like a story falls in your lap about, for example, Joe Biden, and then you're just burying it for political reasons, then that's a problem. But if you're just like, oh man, well, this is going to hurt the Democrats, but well, the thing happened, so I'm going to write about it, is that, but reporters know this, so they have a chip on their shoulder. And Republicans have always taken advantage of that. They're like, you guys are biased. And you're saying something that at its heart, there is some truth to it. Like, but it doesn't mean that the coverage is biased. It's just, but you're just much more careful. You're just, you have this tendency to see both sides. It's like, well, here you think today we have on like these 5 senators who are saying that Hillary Clinton does not drink the blood of children, and here we have like 3 people from back in the day, maybe Yahoo chat group, who are saying that they do, and let them debate. It's like, what are we doing here? And so the media, the regular media, has done such a poor job and continues to do such a poor job to say, this person is lying and this person is nuts. Like for example, I call Trump, it's like, hey, it's a malignant narcissist, and then I post a link to the Mayo Clinic's symptoms of malignant narcissism, and you just read the list and you're like, oh my god, it's the poster child for it. But that explains Trump. Like if you don't acknowledge that he's mentally ill, that he's a compulsive liar, that he's a malignant narcissist, then what are you doing? You can't explain the thing. And so it's like if somebody is hard of hearing and they didn't hear a command, and then they ended up getting shot, and you never mentioned that they're hard of hearing. It's like, well, that's a big part of the story. It's like, well, why didn't he turn around? It's like, well, he's deaf. That's why he didn't turn around. And you didn't flash a light at him or something. But if you're not doing that, you're leaving out a big part of the story. And the big part of the Trump story is that he's nuts. But once you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense then, because then it all makes sense. It's like, well, just imagine like if a crazy person ran the White House, because that's what's happening.
I think it's important to note too, you know, a lot of this sort of right-wing conspiracy culture and the rumor mill, it existed long before Trump. We can even go back to the 90s with people like Rush Limbaugh were trafficking in Vince Foster conspiracy
Yes,
theories,
yes.
and I think sometimes people have forgotten just how far back this goes. And really, this Epstein stuff is almost like the culmination point. We went from Vince Foster conspiracy theories to Pizzagate to QAnon. There was stuff in between. I remember in the 2000s, there were all kinds of conspiracy theories about the Muslim mafia, and just there's always been this trafficking in like really, I think conspiracies happen, but the ones promoted by the right are completely outrageous a lot of times. And not
Right, but
just
that's
that,
the
but the right wing often the people like Roger Stone are the dirty tricks operatives.
well, right, but the problem is that's the thing with Epstein. Epstein isn't that. There's like elements of Epstein where you're like what's the full story? We have no idea what the full story is, but that's the thing. Like with Epstein, there's clearly something there. Like, but when you're like, well, it's like the Clinton body count, like they had all these people killed. Be like, well, well, what are we doing here? Like, show some evidence, but this clearly terrible things happened, and clearly more should have happened. And why? Like, is it local prosecutors who got paid off, or, it goes from like somebody paid off local prosecutors or they were involved to like, hey, the Mossad did it, but at the heart, the thing that is supposed to have happened did happen. So we just don't know enough about it. So, um, and which is funny because now the right wing media would rather not touch it. This is all like this is a grassroots, this is a bottom up effort and not a top down. Like top down, they would shut it down immediately.
But that's what's
Like
interesting. For years, they sort of fed the base paranoia, even in the 90s, and now, in a way, it may be coming back to haunt them.
yeah, and especially Trump. I mean, that's how he would have never been in the running if it weren't for birtherism, which is like a crazy thing. And and this is another great example of like people like took it seriously long after, and you're like, well, Obama kind of botched that a little bit because he's just like, I'm above that. Of course, if you have a birth certificate that you can just pull out at any time, maybe you're like, well, let him do this and make him look him ridiculous. But
I
this is
completely,
how,
you know what? I completely forgot about the birtherism stuff. But yeah, Trump
yeah.
was in on that too, and Jerome Corsi, all the usual suspects.
Well, he was the driving force. This is the reason why Trump became even an option. It's not because he was on his dumb TV show. It's because he got prominent. Because there is this gigantic, and this is like perhaps you know people who are predisposed to just believing things because they're believers, they're evangelicals, and to make the world make sense, you know, and acknowledge the existence of gay people and trans people and peaceful Muslims and all this, like it's so much easier for somebody to be like, hey, all the biases that you have, they're justified. You are right, Farmer Jim from Iowa. Like, you are super right to be suspicious of all these people because they are bad. And instead of being like some introspection where you're like, well, maybe I should rethink some of these things. It's just like we're affirming everything. You think Obama is like a socialist who had like his pastor right, and all this. It's like, yeah, look, he's not even from this country. He went to a madrasa in Indonesia. I mean, need I say more? It's like, yes, you do need to say more. What does it mean? But that's why these conspiracy theories work so well. And Trump just validated them all. And then he is like, and then he taught Republicans that you can just lie about anything. They'll believe you. Fox will put it on the air, and the regular media is not going to push back. And you're seeing, and at first it was just Trump, but now it's everybody. It's just like, hey, yeah, in Texas, we're like, yeah, that's Biden's fault. We had like this new system in place. It's like, what system are you talking about? Where's the money coming from? Who appropriated it? Like, is it just, but it's just like it doesn't matter. You just lie, and that is really why I think everybody's like, hey, let's have like a like a left-wing Joe Rogan or something, but that only like a big part of why that works is also the audience. Like if you have an audience, be like, dude, come on, this doesn't work. But if you're just like, yeah, sure, whatever Joe just said, and if you have an entire TV network, like you just don't have it like a normal journalist. Even if you're like from the Nation, you just had somebody from the Nation on, you have like a left-leaning or like a left-wing publication, you know, but he's not going to lie to you. He's going to give you his spin, but he's not going to be like, well, inflation was 2.7. That's like the highest it's been in 30 years. It's like, what? Yeah, it's been the highest. Like right now, the economy is the worst in the history of the United States after Donald Trump. It's like, well, that doesn't sound right. It's like, no, it's the worst it's ever been. It's the worst in human history. And
I
right
think what
now,
you're not to
mhm.
interrupt you, but I think what you're saying is that the right sort of has an advantage in that they can play off grievance culture and the grievance culture of its base in a way that I don't think Democrats can play on that sort of
Well,
grievance culture. Yeah.
and that's part of it, because it's like this whole white normie victimhood syndrome where it's like, because if you treat, and I write about this stuff a lot, if you treat everything like a zero sum game, and then you're just, and you see that blacks, Hispanics, women, trans people, gays are getting more, your sense is, oh, I must be getting less. Because this is, of course, make America great again. Nobody's ever been like, to what date? Like when did it stop? What was the thing? But it's like when white people ran everything, and that's less the case. And then like Obama, like a catalyst, where all of a sudden it's like, ugh, one of those got elected, and that just like supercharged the whole thing. But that's only part of it. The second part is this complete shamelessness, that people like when people talk, like if you ever listen to, well, I'm sure you have, like a cabinet meeting where everybody has to say some superlative, like when Bondi was like, Trump already saved $238 million from 230 million Americans from fentanyl deaths. It's like, what are you talking about? And then the next person has to be like, this is the most successful, blah, blah, blah. And if you look at any statistic, you're like, it's like, that he can just go and be like, the economy in 2019 was the greatest in the history of the United States. It's like, dude, growth was like 3%. What are you talking about? Like, that's the average over the last 60, 70 years. It's like, yeah, some things were going well and some things not, but you don't have that total lack of shame in the media on the left and generally on the left. And of course you're like, well, of course we don't want this. Like a good example though is, like, I mean, which isn't related to this, but Texas is trying to do the special session to do the mid-decade redistricting to gerrymander the living hell out of the Lone Star State, and so today California was like, okay, we'll take a look, because of this is like a great example of just fighting with uneven weapons. You have like one side, we're cutthroat, we're going after you with everything that we have, we lie, cheat, and steal, and we accuse you of these things that we're doing, but then you're not doing them. And of course, gerrymandering is not a good thing, but that if you're Gavin Newsom, it's like, well, what do we do? Do we just let 3, 4, 5 Republican states who aren't already gerrymandered to the hilt, do we just let them do it? Or do we also do it knowing that it's bad? And so there's always that dilemma, and no option is good. And Republicans are just like, oh, screw it, we're going for it. We're doing all the bad things. and then we're going to pin it on the Democrats. And then you have people who repeat it in bad faith, and you just don't have that on the left. Like if you're, because yes, if I write about this, California does this, I'm going to write about in my story that gerrymandering is a bad thing, because it is. It's a bad thing for democracy, you know, and but that doesn't mean that politically it's not the right thing to do. You know, I'll talk to people who will say that, but I'll also talk to people who are like, this is just a bad precedent, you know, and you like this lack of morals, while on the other hand preaching morals while not practicing them ever and doing like the worst things. That is why those are two really big reasons why the left has such a hard time competing with the right. When if you look at policy, you know, then it's always a different matter. Like it's just like, hey, we got to cut Medicaid in Washington. It's socialism. But if you're like, hey, people of Oklahoma, would you like a Medicaid expansion? They're like, yeah, we do want a Medicaid expansion. You know, so, and that's really the fundamental thing in our political life, that you just have like one side that is, and you see it in the, you know, I used to cover the Senate, so I was on Capitol Hill all day long, and this was like 20 years ago, and it was like everybody was really friendly with each other, you know, like John McCain and Ted Kennedy genuinely loved each other. You know, there's like stories like this. And Democrats, because they're also old, they remember that time, but this is not the time anymore. You know, it's like in the Weimar Republic. If you're just like, yeah, man, I used to have a beer with Goering. It's like, yeah, not anymore, dude. That guy will send you to a concentration camp as soon as he'll have a beer with you now. And so that's the central problem. You just have two sides fighting a completely uneven war. You know.
Before we close out, what I wanted to add to that was I'm originally from the Rust Belt, so I'm from Pittsburgh, PA, and I found it sad when I would come across these Trump supporters that were like, "Well, Trump is going against the elites," and I would be like, "No, the Republican Party has no interest in the working class. It didn't during Reagan, and it doesn't now." But what's weird is the sort of right-wing noise machine is able to craft these narratives. Like they'll say, "Oh, we're against the police state," while they're creating a police state. I'm in Florida right now. They're creating Alligator Alcatraz. You know, this big beautiful bill. It's going to hit working class people really hard, but they act like they're for the working class when they're not. And it's like living in a we're through the looking glass Alice moment, because you're like they're just everything they claim to be is what they aren't. You know, they're not
Yeah,
pro
it
working
is.
class. They're
You're
pro police state. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's the create. That's what it all comes down to. You're creating an alternate reality for people that's much more convenient them to believe in than the reality that they live in, which is difficult. It's very tricky. Like one of the very first things that I learned as a journalist is that there is no black and white. You know, there are very, very, very few issues. It doesn't matter. It's like how strongly liberals feel about one thing or another. You know, like if you are like, for example, I covered OSHA. Like initially I covered OSHA, you know, like at right now it's like Biden did a heat rule, like it can't be. And of course it's getting hotter. Like, do you really want people working outside at 105 degrees, with, like in Florida, for example, without enough water breaks or this, you know, or where an employer has to provide some kind of ventilation or air conditioning or something, indoors and outdoors, you know, and you're like, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. But there is a cost to these things. So if you're not helping small businesses, or, you know, it does have an effect. So you can't just say, we are right and you're wrong on everything. There's always going to be a bit of a give and take. So even like stuff where, you know, conservatives feel really, really strongly about, traditionally at least, you know, you're like, okay, well, compromise a little bit, and then we'll take your concerns into mind, and you take ours into account, and then we'll just meet somewhere, you know, and that's how it's supposed to go. But we're just not seeing it. It's just my way or the highway. And because you create a fake reality, all these people will just believe, again, they're not, they're doing their own research, but they're not. They're all just like, looking at stuff that's being spoon fed to them in their own echo
They're
chambers.
reading the Drudge
And
Report. Yeah.
yes, yes. Well, not the Drudge Report anymore. The Drudge Report is super anti-Trump, so
Okay.
uh, I mean,
That
Drudge
shows
is,
how much I know these days.
yes. Well, Drudge is really interesting because when I said before Elon Musk, and Drudge is much less influential now than he was before, you know.
Right.
But like if somebody like Drudge would be like, here's some stuff that Trump said before, here's some stuff that he, like then people would still read it. But you got to pierce that bubble. And that's really, really, really difficult. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on Parallax Views. What do you want to say in closing? What do you hope my listeners get out of this conversation?
Oh man, that's tricky. I think go out and like educate yourself and educate others, with like real information. There's real information out there. There is government reports, and of course you can be like, well, that's the deep state doing them, but you still got to make a good faith effort, and to not lose hope. Like it's really difficult. Like you have these marches every month, 2 or 3, like the No Kings March and everything, and people show up for that and everything. But of course, this is relentless. Like Stephen Miller is not going to take a day off, like turning the United States into some like white nationalist hellhole, or in his view, utopia, So I know people can be discouraged by politics, and it's really, really difficult, but it's also really important. So you gotta, you gotta do stuff, you know. So you gotta educate yourself and educate others. Read, and yeah, that's it.
I just wanted to ask one more question. Where do you think the focus for people on the left, or and I mean the left broadly, whether it's people that are like farther to the left in like the DSA or just in the Democratic Party, where do you think their attention should be? Because I think there's a lot of infighting on the left.
Economic inequality. It all has to be economic inequality. Like I think some interest groups have to take a back seat. So I would just go uh, health insurance for all, minimum wage, paid sick leave, like things that are normal everywhere in the world, and just go with those things. And the other stuff, like don't even, Fox is always going to manufacture this woke stuff and everything, but it's like, remember, like you're not going to win any of those battles unless you win the war. So it just has to be economic inequality. This is what they're doing. This is what they want to give money to billionaires. We want to take money from billionaires. It's all got to be, it's the like, listen, this isn't right versus left. This is up versus down, and you are down. If you don't know if you're up or down, you're down, you know, and if you know that you're down, you're way down.
Do you think Democrats have occasionally missed a golden opportunity in framing things that way, or?
Democrats are terrible at this. I think they just are, they they also live like the Washington people. They live in the bubble too. They're like, oh my God, like they feel those things. They were like, oh my God, this must really do Trump in. Let's focus on this thing. It's like, no, it's all just a sideshow. He's never gonna get hurt. Like it's what's the saying? Like if you want to wrestle a pig, only the pig will enjoy it, or you got to get in the mud and then only the pig will enjoy it. That's like doing that with Trump. Like that's his thing. You just got to go economy, economy, economy. What's in it for you? What's in it for you? What's in it for you? And that's got to be the only thing. It's like, and then if somebody is like, oh yeah, but what about DEI, or what about like this trans athlete or this? It's like, hey, you're just trying to distract from wanting to give money to billionaires when we want to take it from billionaires. You're just trying to distract. We're just focused on this, and this. All the other stuff can come later, but you got to win elections, and there's none more important than the next two.
Well, hey, I want to thank you again for coming on Parallax Views. How can my listeners keep up with your work? I think you're on Blue Sky, right?
Yes, I am on Blue Sky, and of course they can read whowhatwhy.org. I will have I write almost daily, and just there's a Substack, but I wouldn't even know. I so rarely, I don't do this. I don't do this for views and clicks and everything. I do it because it's important. So I couldn't even tell you like what all my handles are, but go to whowhatwhy.org. There's a lot of great stuff there, and you'll see my byline every single day. And from there's some links, but really just care, people, like whether you get your information from me or others, just make sure you get it.
I'm JG Michael, and this is Parallax Views.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. Independent media matters, and your support makes it possible. If Parallax Views has challenged your thinking, exposed you to new ideas, or simply kept you company on your commute, now's the time to help sustain it. Listen, share, and if you can, support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. If you want, you can also make a one-time donation by contacting me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. I can give you a link to my PayPal page if you contact me that way. Let's show what listener-supported media can do. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we're going to be joined by first-time guest Klaus Marre of the independent news website Who, What, Why to discuss the infighting within MAGA over Jeffrey Epstein. Trump says, forget about it. Get over this Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Why are you still talking about it? I'm tired of these supporters of mine talking about it. I don't want them to support me anymore. Now, some MAGA influencers are supporting him or placing the blame on figures like Pam Bondi. But a number of MAGA supporters seem very angry about the Trump administration wanting to drop the Epstein case, push it to the side. We're going to talk about the implications of that. We'll also talk about the right-wing noise machine or the right-wing propaganda machine, a subject that Klaus has written a lot about. And we'll even talk about the failings of the Democratic Party, especially near the end of the episode. So, with all that being said, let's get right to it with Who, What, Why's Klaus Marre.